An abandoned white German Shepherd puppy lay trembling in a barn, broken and unwanted, until a silent boy, too scared to speak, reached out with shaking hands. What followed was a bond so pure it healed two shattered hearts. This is the story of how a boy found his voice and a puppy discovered the meaning of home. Before we move on, if you're an animal lover, tap subscribe. It's completely free, and every click inspires us to keep sharing the stories that truly touch the heart and give a voice to those who can't speak for themselves. The barn smelled of rain-soaked straw and forgotten hay. It was the kind of place people passed by without noticing, a hollow in the countryside where silence lingered heavier than the dust in the beams of sunlight. That silence was broken only by the faint whimper of a puppy. She was tiny, all fur and bones, her once white coat dulled by dirt and neglect. The little German Shepherd pup huddled in the corner, ears flat, blue-gray, eyes wide with fear. Her ribs pressed against her skin, her body trembling as if the world itself was too heavy for her to bear. Someone had left her here, abandoned, unwanted. That same silence weighed on Jamie too. 8 years old, he had stopped speaking months ago. Not because he couldn't, but because something inside him had fractured. After his father left, after the fights at home, after nights when he hid beneath the covers to shut out the noise, Jamie's voice had simply disappeared. He became a boy of shadows, communicating with glances and gestures, his words trapped in a place no one could reach. When Jamie's mother brought him to the countryside to live with his grandparents, she hoped fresh air and distance would heal him. But in that farmhouse, surrounded by quiet fields and ticking clocks, Jamie remained locked inside himself. Until the day he heard the whimper. He had wandered into the old barn, following a sound most adults would have ignored. His small hands pushed aside a broken door, and his eyes adjusted to the gloom. That was when he saw her, the fragile bundle of white fur, shaking with hunger and fear. For a long moment, boy and puppy stared at each other. Two creatures bound by silence. Two beings who knew what it was to be abandoned. Jamie crouched, his knees creaking against the hay. He didn't move closer. The pup's ears twitched, her tiny chest rising and falling in uneven breaths. She let out another cry, soft and desperate. Jamie's lips parted. No sound came, but his eyes softened. Slowly, gently, he placed a piece of bread from his pocket on the straw between them. The pup sniffed, unsure, then crawled forward on trembling legs. She devoured the crust in hurried gulps, tail barely wagging. Jamie's throat tightened. He wanted to say something, anything, but his voice stayed trapped. Instead, he extended his hand, palm up. The puppy hesitated, then nudged her nose into his fingers. In that instant, something passed between them. Recognition. Understanding. A fragile bridge built out of shared wounds. When Jamie returned to the farmhouse, his grandmother noticed the change. His eyes, usually clouded with distance, seemed brighter. That evening he tugged her sleeve and pointed back toward the barn. She followed, confused, until she saw the pup. Her heart ached at the sight, a starving, abandoned creature clinging to life. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, kneeling beside the trembling animal. They carried the pup inside, wrapping her in a faded towel. Jamie refused to let go of her, holding her close to his chest, as if she might vanish if he loosened his grip. His grandmother warmed milk on the stove and poured it into a shallow dish. Together, they coaxed the pup to drink. When Jamie's grandfather came in from the fields, his boots muddy and his brow furrowed, he paused at the sight. His stern face softened. "Looks like we've got ourselves another mouth to feed," he said quietly. Jamie's grandmother touched his arm. "She's alone." Just like him. That night, Jamie slept with the puppy curled against him. For the first time in months, he did not dream of shouting voices or slamming doors. Instead, he dreamed of running through fields with the little white pup bounding beside him. Morning light spilled into the room, and Jamie woke to find the puppy licking his hand. He smiled. A small, hesitant smile, but real. He still didn't speak. But something inside him stirred. The puppy stirred too. Her tail thumped weakly against the blanket, and for the first time since she'd been abandoned, she felt safe. Two broken souls had found each other in the silence. And though neither could know it yet, This was the beginning of a bond that would heal wounds no medicine could touch. Because sometimes, the voice of the heart is louder than any words. And sometimes, a boy who won't speak and a puppy no one wanted are exactly what the other has been waiting for. The days that followed seemed to shift the rhythm of the farmhouse. Life there had always been simple. Meals at the wooden table, chores in the fields, evenings by the crackling fireplace. But now, there was something more. There was the sound of tiny paws clicking against the floorboards and the quiet hum of hope returning. Jamie carried the puppy everywhere. To the barn, to the orchard, even to the stream that ran behind the house. He hadn't given her a name yet. He didn't know how to. Names meant words, and words were still locked inside him. But the way his arms cradled her spoke enough. The puppy's health was fragile. She wobbled when she walked, her thin legs trembling under her small frame. But she ate, she drank, and each day, her eyes seemed less clouded with fear. Her once limp tail began to wag when Jamie entered the room. One afternoon, as Jamie sat in the grass with the pup nestled in his lap, his grandmother came out carrying a bowl of stew for him. She placed it on the porch rail and watched quietly. The boy was tracing circles in the pup's soft fur, his lips moving silently, as if whispering words only the puppy could hear. His grandmother's throat tightened. She remembered when Jamie's laughter used to fill their kitchen. She remembered the night it stopped. She had tried so hard to reach him, but nothing worked. And yet now, this fragile, abandoned animal had cracked open a door no one else could touch. That evening, while Jamie dozed on the couch with the puppy curled beside him, his grandparents talked softly in the kitchen. "She's healing him," his grandmother said. His grandfather nodded slowly, his rough hands folded around a chipped mug. "And maybe he's healing her too." The puppy proved that true the next morning. Jamie had been trying to coax her into standing a little longer, placing bits of food just out of reach so she would stretch her legs. She whined, uncertain, then stumbled forward. And then she barked. A tiny, hoarse sound, rough with effort but full of life. Jamie froze. His eyes widened. Then, for the first time in months, he laughed. It was soft, almost startled, but it burst out of him like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. His grandmother heard it from the kitchen and pressed a hand to her chest, tears stinging her eyes. She didn't rush in. She let the moment be theirs. From that day on, the boy and the pup seemed inseparable. They explored the edges of the fields together, Jamie pointing to butterflies and birds, the pup tilting her head in curiosity. He began to hum again, soft tunes he remembered from lullabies his mother once sang. The puppy leaned into the vibrations, soothed by the sound. Still, words remained locked away. Jamie's silence lingered, though not as heavily. His mother called every evening, asking about him. His grandmother would say, "He's smiling more." And though she longed to tell her daughter that he had spoken, she knew healing couldn't be rushed. One evening, rain rolled across the fields. Thunder rumbled low, shaking the windows. Jamie's shoulders stiffened at the sound. He pulled the puppy close, burying his face in her fur. The pup whimpered, ears flat against her head. For a moment, both boy and dog trembled together. Then Jamie lifted his head. He looked into her eyes. And though his lips didn't form words, his expression seemed to say, "It's okay. We're safe." The pup pressed her nose to his cheek, a whine rumbling in her throat. Slowly, her shaking stopped. Jamie's too. That night, when the storm passed, Jamie's grandfather found them asleep together under the blanket by the fireplace. The puppy's paw rested on the boy's chest, as if guarding his heart. The next morning, as sun spilled gold across the fields, Jamie finally gave her a name. He sat with her in the grass, whispering without sound, his lips shaping a word again and again until it felt right. His grandmother leaned closer, watching. "Luna," she said softly. "You're calling her Luna." Jamie's eyes flicked to her, startled that she had understood. But then, slowly, he nodded. Luna. The little white pup, abandoned under the shadow of loneliness, now carried a name that meant light in the darkness. And for Jamie, naming her was the first step back toward his own voice. They didn't know it yet, but Luna's healing had only just begun. For the silence inside Jamie was deeper than anyone realized. and it would take more than love alone to bring him fully back. But for the first time in a long time, there was hope. Because in that farmhouse, under the wide sky, a boy who had forgotten how to speak and a puppy who had been left to die had found each other. And together, they were learning how to live again. By the time autumn came, Luna had grown strong. Her ribs no longer showed, her steps were steady, and her coat gleamed white against the golden fields. Jamie, too, had changed. The shadows beneath his eyes had lightened. He carried himself differently, as if Luna's presence gave him courage. But still, his voice remained hidden. One afternoon, his grandmother asked him to help gather apples from the orchard. Jamie nodded silently and went out, Luna bounding happily at his side. The trees were heavy with fruit, and the boy climbed the ladder with a basket, carefully plucking one apple at a time. Luna circled below, tail wagging. Halfway through, the ladder wobbled. Jamie froze, panic flashing across his face. His hand tightened around the rung. Below, Luna barked sharply, a warning, steady and strong. Jamie's eyes locked on her, and something in that sound anchored him. He climbed down carefully, his chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. When his grandmother reached him, worried, Jamie did something he hadn't done in months. He met her eyes. Just for a second. But it was enough. She brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, whispering, "You're okay." Luna pressed against his legs as though echoing it. That night, Jamie sat with a notebook at the kitchen table. He began sketching clumsy little drawings, himself and Luna under trees, Luna chasing butterflies, Luna curled against him while he slept. At the top of the page, in careful block letters, he wrote one word: safe. The next day at school, his teacher noticed the drawings in his backpack. She asked if he'd like to share them with the class, but Jamie shook his head quickly, clutching the papers to his chest. Still, she smiled. It was progress. It was Luna who finally coaxed something more. One crisp morning, as frost clung to the grass, Jamie was sitting on the porch with her. She chased a leaf, pounced clumsily, then looked up at him expectantly, waiting for approval. Something inside him cracked open. "Good girl," he whispered. The sound startled even him. His hand flew to his mouth, eyes wide. But Luna's ears perked. She barked once, joyfully, then bounded back to him. His grandmother, who had been sweeping inside, froze. She dropped the broom, tears spilling down her cheeks. She didn't rush out, didn't smother him. She just leaned against the wall, listening. 2 tiny words, but to her, it was music. After that, Jamie spoke in fragments. A word here, a phrase there, almost always to Luna. At night, she lay beside him, her body curved against his, and he whispered into her fur. His words were halting, but they came. The school counselor noticed the change too. One afternoon, she called his grandmother. "He isn't speaking to classmates yet," she said gently, "but he's humming. He laughs when Luna's in the picture he draws." That's a voice beginning to return. At home, Jamie's mother cried quietly on the phone when she heard. She worked long hours in the city, unable to be there every day, but she carried that hope with her like a lantern. Still, progress wasn't steady. There were setbacks, days when Jamie shut down, when the world felt too loud, too sharp. On those days, Luna became his shield. She'd curl against him in the corner of his room, steady as stone. She didn't ask him for words. She didn't need them. One rainy afternoon, Jamie had a nightmare. He woke sobbing silently, his chest heaving, his fists clenched. Luna scrambled onto the bed and pressed her body against his. He clung to her, his tears soaking into her fur. Then, in a trembling voice, he choked out a single word: "Stay." And she did. The more Luna healed, the more Jamie risked his voice. Slowly, the farm filled again with sounds his grandparents thought they'd lost forever. A quiet "thank you" when his grandmother passed him food. A soft "yes" when his grandfather asked if he wanted to go fishing. They never pushed him. They let Luna lead the way. It was at the fishing pond, weeks later, that Jamie spoke more than a whisper. He sat with Luna beside him, feet dangling above the water, the rod resting in his hands. His grandfather, sitting nearby, wasn't catching anything. Jamie looked at him, then at Luna, and a smile tugged at his lips. Maybe she'll catch one for you, he said softly. His grandfather's hand stilled. His throat worked as he tried to swallow the sudden wave of emotion. He forced a chuckle, blinking fast. Maybe she will. Luna tilted her head, as if pleased. That night, Jamie wrote in his notebook again. This time, the words weren't just for him. He left the page on the kitchen table before bed. It read, "Luna helps me be brave." His grandmother found it in the morning, and for the first time in years, she dared to believe that her grandson's silence might truly break one day. But none of them yet knew how far Luna's healing could reach, or that soon, Jamie's courage would be tested in a way that would prove just how strong the bond between a boy and a once-abandoned puppy could become. The seasons shifted quietly around the farmhouse, and with them, so did Jamie. Winter, which had always felt endless and gray, was different this time. Though the cold still seeped in through the wooden beams and frost still painted the windows, warmth lingered in every room where Toby lay curled by the fire. The puppy's snowy coat seemed to glow in the light, as if he were born to bring brightness into dark places. Jamie's mother noticed the changes first. Her son still didn't speak, but his silence had softened. It was no longer an empty void, but something filled with gestures, with shared looks, with small unspoken conversations between him and the dog. She'd see Jamie crouched on the rug, whispering movements of his fingers across Toby's fur, and Toby's ears would perk as if he understood every signal. Sometimes Jamie laughed, a quiet puff of air, almost like a breath of song. For a mother who had grown used to stillness, it was a miracle. School remained a battle. Jamie carried Toby in his heart, but couldn't carry him through the doors. Bullies noticed his silence more than his drawings, and whispers followed him down the halls. But something was shifting there too. Jamie no longer shrank from the stares. Instead, when the teasing came, he would hold Toby's worn bandana in his pocket. His thumb rubbed the soft fabric until the tremors passed. It wasn't courage in the usual sense, but it was a growing steadiness. One morning in March, Jamie woke before the sun. He patted down the creaky stairs and found Toby waiting at the bottom, tail thumping softly against the wood. Jamie froze, staring at his companion, and then did something no one expected. He spoke. Just one word. Barely a whisper, hoarse and uncertain. Toby. The sound startled even him. Toby tilted his head, ears pricking forward, as if hearing his name for the first time. His tail wagged wildly, and he leapt forward, pressing his nose against Jamie's hand. Jamie laughed, this time out loud. It was rusty, a sound unused for years, but it rang through the house like church bells on a quiet morning. His mother, rushing from the kitchen at the sound, covered her mouth in disbelief. From that moment, a door opened. Words did not pour out like a flood, but they trickled, slow and steady. Sometimes Jamie whispered to Toby alone in the barn. Sometimes he hummed while brushing the puppy's coat. Each sound was like a thread stitching a torn fabric back together. But the world beyond the farm wasn't done testing them. Late that spring, Jamie's father, long absent, a ghost in their lives, appeared again. His boots crunched on the gravel driveway one evening, his shadow long against the sunset. Jamie stiffened at the window. He remembered shouting, the slam of doors, the day silence first became his shield. Toby sensed the fear instantly. His hackles lifted, his body low and protective. The man wanted back in. Claimed he was sober, claimed he had changed. But trust was not so easily rebuilt. Jamie's mother stood her ground, her voice steady but guarded. Jamie himself retreated into the barn, clutching Toby so tightly the puppy whined. Memories clawed at him, raised voices, breaking glass, nights he'd hidden under his bed. Toby nudged his chin, grounding him in the present. The boy buried his face into the white fur and whispered, "Stay." His father's visit ended quickly, promises left hanging in the air. But it reopened wounds. For days, Jamie didn't speak at all. He feared that the small progress he had made would vanish like smoke. Yet Toby refused to let him fall back into the dark. The puppy followed him relentlessly, dropping sticks at his feet, pawing at his sketchbook, even placing his head on Jamie's chest when nightmares shook him awake. One night, when thunder rolled and the farmhouse rattled, Toby did something extraordinary. Instead of cowering, he barked, a deep, strong sound for such a young dog. It startled Jamie out of his trembling. Lightning flashed, thunder cracked, and Toby barked again, standing tall against the storm. Something in Jamie shifted. He sat up, placed both hands on Toby's fur, and spoke again. This time the word was different. Brave. It was shaky but real. His mother heard it from the hallway and pressed her hand to her heart, tears spilling silently. She knew her son was finding not only his voice, but his strength. From then on, Jamie began choosing words carefully, sparingly, but with intent. He said Toby's name each morning as if it were a prayer. He whispered good night before bed. Sometimes, to his mother's astonishment, he even tried singing, soft, broken melodies that reminded her of the little boy she had once known before silence stole him away. The puppy had done more than bring joy. He had cracked open a door Jamie thought was forever locked. Together, they faced storms inside and out, and together, they learned what it meant to be brave. But the journey was far from over. Ahead lay the hardest test yet, one that would demand more than whispered words. It would demand that Jamie step fully into the world, with Toby at his side, and show everyone the strength they had built in silence. Spring warmed into summer, and with it, Toby grew from a fluffy pup into a young dog with a proud chest and steady stride. His snowy coat shimmered under the sun, a beacon wherever he went. Jamie had grown too, not taller, not louder, but steadier. The boy who once shrank into corners now walked with his hand buried in white fur, his gaze lifted just enough to meet the horizon. It was Mrs. Callahan, the art teacher, who noticed first. She had always admired Jamie's sketches, the way his pencils seemed to speak when his voice could not. One afternoon, she invited his mother to a school exhibition, an end-of-year showcase where students shared music, paintings, and stories. "I think Jamie should show his work," she said gently. "And maybe he'll say something about it." His mother's eyes brimmed with hope and fear. At home, she broached the idea carefully. "Jamie, they want to see your drawings. You don't have to talk. Just show them. Toby can be there too." At the sound of Toby's name, Jamie lifted his head. The dog wagged his tail as if already volunteering. Jamie pressed his lips together, thinking, and then gave the smallest nod. It was enough. The night of the exhibition arrived hot and heavy, cicadas buzzing in the trees outside the school. Parents and children filled the gymnasium, voices echoing off the walls. Jamie clutched his folder of drawings, his knuckles white. Toby walked at his side, wearing his blue bandana, his presence like a lifeline. The program moved quickly, a violin solo, a poetry reading, a science project demonstration. Jamie's turn came sooner than he expected. Mrs. Callahan announced his name, her voice kind, encouraging. Whispers rose. "That's the boy who never talks." All eyes turned. Jamie froze at the edge of the stage. His heart pounded like thunder. He wanted to run. But then Toby pressed his nose against Jamie's hand, grounding him. The boy took a trembling step forward, then another, until both stood in the center of the stage under the hot lights. He laid his drawings on the easel. Toby's first night in the barn, curled small against straw, the sunrise over the farmhouse, Toby's bright eyes and wagging tail. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The sketches weren't just pictures. They were alive, full of emotion, love, and longing. Mrs. Callahan smiled gently. "Would you like to tell us about them, Jamie?" For a moment, silence returned, the kind that used to suffocate him. Then Jamie felt Toby's fur beneath his hand. He remembered the night he first spoke his name, the storm when he whispered brave, and he realized he wasn't alone anymore. He swallowed hard. And then, softly but clearly, he said, "This is Toby." The room went still. A hush so profound it felt holy. Parents leaned forward, children stopped fidgeting, and his mother covered her mouth with both hands. Jamie's voice wavered, but he kept going. "He found me. When I couldn't speak. When I was alone." He stayed. Toby wagged his tail, and the audience let out a collective breath, some eyes glistening. Jamie pointed to the drawings, his hand no longer shaking. "He makes me brave." The last word cracked, but it was enough. Applause erupted, not polite but thunderous. Some teachers wept openly. Jamie's mother sobbed into her hands, pride and relief washing over her. And Toby, sweet Toby, sat tall beside the boy, tail sweeping the stage as if conducting the ovation himself. That night, Jamie did something he never thought he could. He walked off the stage smiling. Not because the fear was gone, but because he had faced it. Toby at his side, he had spoken into the silence, and the world had listened. Back home, the farmhouse felt lighter. Jamie's mother hung his drawings on the walls. Letters arrived from neighbors who had attended, thanking Jamie for his courage. One even offered to sponsor him for an art program in the city. For the first time in years, the boy's future felt open, filled with possibility. But more important than programs or praise was this: Jamie had tasted freedom. His words, though few, no longer felt impossible. He began practicing each day with Toby as his audience, reading stories aloud in halting whispers, humming tunes until they became songs. Toby listened, patient as always, every sound etched into his loyal heart. And yet, life wasn't done testing them. Shadows from the past still lingered, waiting for the chance to return. Jamie's father remained a storm on the horizon, unpredictable and dangerous. And beyond the farm, the world was still harsh, still full of challenges Jamie would have to face. But now, for the first time, he wasn't afraid of what lay ahead. He had Toby, and together, they were learning how to be brave not only in silence, but in sound, not only in sketches, but in speech. The stage had been just the beginning. Summer stretched golden and wide, fields swaying under warm breezes. Jamie and Toby spent their days exploring the land beyond the farmhouse, chasing dragonflies by the creek, lying in tall grass, watching the clouds drift. To anyone passing by, it might have looked like an ordinary boy with his dog. But for those who knew, it was a miracle unfolding in plain sight. Jamie's voice, once stolen, was returning. Slowly, carefully, word by word. He didn't speak often, but when he did, it was purposeful. At night, his mother would sometimes hear him through the thin walls, whispering to Toby, "Stay safe, love you." Each syllable was a triumph. Toby had become more than a companion. He was a guardian of courage. When Jamie faltered, Toby leaned closer. When nightmares clawed back, Toby pressed his weight against him until the tremors passed. They were no longer just boy and dog. They were halves of the same heart. One evening, near the end of summer, the farmhouse phone rang. It was Mrs. Callahan again. The town council was holding a charity fair to raise funds for children's programs. She wanted Jamie to participate, not just to display his art this time, but to tell his story. Even a few words, she said. It could help so many. Jamie's mother hesitated. The thought of placing her son on another stage, in front of strangers, terrified her. But Jamie, listening quietly, surprised them both. He whispered, "Yes." The night of the fair glowed with lanterns strung across the town square. Music drifted through the air, laughter mingled with the scent of fresh bread and roasted corn. Stalls lined the streets, but at the center stood a wooden stage with a microphone gleaming under the lights. Jamie clutched his sketchbook to his chest, Toby walking proudly at his side. Whispers followed them again, but this time they weren't cruel. People remembered the boy who had spoken his first words months before. Now they waited in anticipation. When Jamie stepped onto the stage, silence fell. He opened his sketchbook, showing drawings of his journey. Toby curled in the barn, lightning splitting the night, their first sunrise together, and finally, a drawing of the stage where he had whispered his first words. The crowd gasped softly, moved by the rawness captured on paper. Then Jamie did something no one expected. He raised the microphone with trembling hands. His voice, still fragile, wavered but carried. "This is my friend, Toby." A ripple of recognition swept the crowd. He swallowed, glanced at Toby, and continued. "I was silent, afraid, alone. But Toby stayed. He listened when no one else could. He gave me my voice." His mother, standing at the edge of the stage, wept openly. Neighbors dabbed at their eyes. The boy who had once hidden from the world now stood before them, speaking truth into the night. Toby barked once, loud and clear, as if sealing the moment. Laughter and applause erupted, not mocking but joyful, carried on waves of love. Jamie smiled, a real, radiant smile, and for the first time, he felt the world embracing him, not for what he lacked, but for what he had found. After the fair, strangers approached, some thanking Jamie, some kneeling to stroke Toby's fur. A few children, shy and quiet like Jamie once was, tugged at their parents' sleeves. They saw themselves in him, saw hope in his courage. Toby, gentle as always, let them bury their faces in his coat. Weeks later, Jamie's story traveled beyond the town. A local paper wrote about the boy and his white German shepherd. Soon, letters poured in from families who knew what silence felt like, who knew the weight of fear. Jamie read each one slowly, with Toby by his side. He realized his voice wasn't just his anymore. It belonged to others who needed to believe healing was possible. Years would pass, and Jamie would grow taller, his voice stronger. Toby would age, his muzzle silvering but his loyalty unshaken. They would face new storms, some fierce, some gentle, but always together. And when Jamie stood before others, whether on a stage or in a quiet classroom, he would remember that his first words after years of silence had been spoken not to the world, but to a puppy who refused to give up on him. Toby had healed his heart, word by word, breath by breath. And in return, Jamie had given Toby what every abandoned soul longs for: a home, a family, and a purpose. Their story became more than a tale of rescue. It became a reminder that sometimes the smallest creatures carry the loudest miracles, that love doesn't need many words, only loyalty, patience, and the courage to stay. As Jamie often whispered into Toby's fur before sleep, the simplest truth bound them forever. "You healed me." And Toby, with a wag of his tail and a quiet sigh, always answered without a sound,